My name's Jake, and I guess I'm here because I feel like my world's been turned upside down. Let me start with a little background so this all makes sense. My wife, Lauren, and I have been married for 8 years. We met in college. She was the bubbly, outgoing one who could light up a room, and I was the quieter, more analytical type. Somehow, we balanced each other out. Or at least, I thought we did. Our marriage wasn't perfect, whose is? But I always thought we were solid. We have a nice home. No kids yet, a point of tension, but I'll get to that later. And what I assumed was a good partnership. Sure, things had been a little off lately. Lauren had been more irritable, snapping at me over little things like forgetting to unload the dishwasher or not folding her laundry the right way. But I chalked it up to stress. She'd recently started a new job that was demanding a lot of her time. I'm not one to pry, and I've always trusted her. Maybe I was a fool for that, but I never thought I had a reason not to. That was until a few weeks ago. It all started with the little things. Lauren became glued to her phone. She was always on it, even during dinner, and when I'd ask her who she was talking to, she'd roll her eyes and say something like, "Ugh, Jake, it's work stuff." Sometimes, she'd even get defensive, accusing me of not trusting her. That was new. Lauren never used to care if I asked about her day or who she was texting. Then there were the late nights. She started staying out longer than usual, saying she was working overtime or grabbing drinks with coworkers. I'm not some overbearing husband, so I didn't push too hard at first. But then she'd come home smelling like a mix of booze and cologne. Not her perfume, someone else's. I noticed it one night when I leaned in for a kiss, and she pulled away, muttering something about being tired. I'm not proud of this next part, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So one night when she was in the shower, I looked at her phone. Don't crucify me for it. I had to know. What I found wasn't concrete, just a text thread with someone named Matt. It was all work-related on the surface, but there were flirty undertones that set my stomach churning. Stuff like, "You always know how to make me laugh," and "I had a great time tonight. Let's do it again soon." I wanted to believe it was innocent. Maybe I was overthinking it. But that feeling, that gut-wrenching, sick-to-your-stomach feeling, didn't go away. And then, one night, everything came crashing down. Lauren told me she had to work late, again. "We've got this huge deadline coming up," she said, avoiding eye contact as she grabbed her purse and keys. "Don't wait up." I don't know why, but this time, something snapped in me. Maybe it was the way she wouldn't look at me, or the way she seemed almost eager to leave. I didn't argue, just nodded and said, "Okay, have a good night." But instead of settling in for another lonely evening on the couch, I grabbed my jacket and decided to follow her. Yeah, I know how that sounds, paranoid, desperate. But at this point, I couldn't sit in the dark and keep wondering. I had to know. She didn't go to work. Instead, she drove straight to this trendy little wine bar downtown. I parked a few spots away and watched her walk in. She looked different, like she'd made extra effort. Hair perfectly styled, a dress I hadn't seen her wear in ages, and those heels she always claimed hurt too much for just dinner with me. About 15 minutes later, I saw him. A guy about my age, maybe a little younger, with that cocky grin you can spot a mile away. He hugged her as soon as he walked in, one of those too long hugs that made my blood boil. They grabbed a corner table and ordered drinks, leaning in close, laughing like they were the only two people in the room that I just sat there, frozen. Part of me wanted to storm in, flip the table, and demand answers. But another part of me, the quieter, more rational part, told me to wait to see how far this went. So I waited. And what I saw next shattered me completely. They stayed at the bar for about an hour, maybe a little more. I watched them sip their wine, their heads tilted toward each other as if sharing some private joke. Every now and then, Lauren would touch his arm or laugh in that way she used to laugh with me. It was like watching someone else's wife, not mine. When they got up to leave, I thought maybe they'd part ways, that this was just an emotional thing. Still bad, but not as devastating as what came next. Instead, I watched her climb into his car, her laugh echoing in the cool night air as they drove off together. This point. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the steering wheel. I followed them, keeping a few cars back, praying to whatever higher power there is that I was wrong about what I knew was about to happen. He pulled into the parking lot of a boutique hotel on the edge of town. My chest felt like it was caving in as I watched them walk inside together. His arm casually draped around her waist. They didn't even look back. I sat there for what felt like forever, staring at the glowing hotel sign, my mind racing. Should I storm in? Call her out right there? But what would that accomplish? She'd lie, spin some excuse, gaslight me until I doubted my own eyes. I needed proof, something undeniable. So I did what I thought I'd never do. I called a private investigator. The PI came highly recommended, and when I explained the situation, he agreed to head to the hotel immediately. I left the scene, my stomach in knots, and spent the rest of the night pacing the house like a madman. By morning, the PI had what I needed. Pictures. Videos. My wife, in another man's arms, leaving his hotel room at dawn. She wasn't just cheating. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I couldn't sleep that night. I just sat in the living room with the lights off, replaying everything in my head. The images the PI sent me were burned into my brain. Lauren, walking out of that hotel with her hair a mess, laughing like nothing had happened. By the time she got home around 9 a.m., I was ready for her. She walked through the door looking smug, carrying some lame excuse on her face like she was coming home from yoga or brunch. "Morning," she said casually, avoiding my eyes as she set her purse on the counter. "You're up early." "Cut the crap, Lauren," I said, my voice shaking. "Where were you last night?" She froze for a second, then turned around, her face a mask of feigned confusion. "What are you talking about? I told you I was working late." "Working late? Really? Because I know you weren't at work. I saw you at the wine bar with your buddy Matt. And I saw you walk into a hotel with him." Her face paled, and for a moment I thought she might actually come clean. But no. Lauren doubled down, her voice rising with indignation. "Are you following me now? Jesus, Jake, that's insane. Matt is just a coworker. We were going over some work stuff, and I was too tired to drive home, so I crashed in his room. Separate beds, obviously." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Separate beds, huh? You expect me to believe that after seeing you all over each other at the bar? After seeing the pictures of you leaving the room together this morning?" She didn't have an answer for that, at least not right away. Her face twisted into a mix of anger and panic, and she resorted to the oldest trick in the book, deflection. "You went through my stuff? You hired someone to spy on me? That's disgusting, Jake. How could you do that? You don't trust me, and honestly, that's the real problem here." "The real problem?" I exploded. "The real problem is you sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face, and sleeping with some guy while I'm at home thinking everything's fine." She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms like she was the victim in all this. "I'm not doing this right now," she said coldly. "You're being irrational. I need some space to think." And just like that, she walked upstairs, leaving me standing there, fists clenched, my whole world crumbling around me. After Lauren stormed upstairs, I just stood there, staring at the spot where she'd been. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. Space to think? She wanted space to think? I was the one who needed space. Space from the lies, the betrayal, and her ridiculous attempt to turn this around on me. I finally forced myself to move, pacing back and forth in the kitchen like a caged animal. Every fiber of my being wanted to march upstairs, throw open the bedroom door, and demand she face me. But what was the point? She'd just keep lying. Lauren had proven she was a master at spinning stories. Instead, I grabbed my car keys and walked out the door. I didn't have a destination in mind, just needed to get out of the house before I did or said something I couldn't take back. That I ended up in the parking lot of a diner we used to frequent, back when things were good. Funny how those memories now felt like a cruel joke. I ordered a coffee I didn't want and stared blankly out the window, trying to make sense of everything. What was she thinking? Did she ever love me? Or had this whole marriage been a convenient setup for her until something better came along? And Matt, was he some long-standing affair? Or just a fling she decided to test drive? My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Lauren. "I think we should talk when you get home." I didn't mean for things to get so heated earlier. Heated? That was her takeaway? My wife cheats on me, lies to my face, and the issue is that things got heated? I didn't reply. Instead, I sat there for another hour, drowning in a toxic mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. Eventually, I drove home, but I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. I needed a plan, something to help me get through the chaos that was about to unfold. When I got back, Lauren was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She glanced up at me and sighed. "Jake, can we just be civil about this? I feel like we're both overreacting." I didn't say a word. I walked past her, went straight to the guest room, and shut the door. That night in the guest room, I barely slept. I kept replaying the confrontation over and over, dissecting every word she'd said, every lie she told. We're both overreacting? No, Lauren, you're overreacting to being caught, and I'm reacting to you betraying me. There's a difference. By morning, I felt hollow, but something had shifted in me. I wasn't just hurt anymore, I was angry. Angry at Lauren, angry at Matt, and honestly, angry at myself for not catching on sooner. I wasn't about to let her gaslight me into thinking this was my fault. Lauren was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, sipping her coffee like it was just another Tuesday. She glanced at me but didn't say anything. I decided to push her, to see how far she'd go to keep up the charade. "So, did you sleep well?" I asked, leaning casually against the counter. I know I didn't. What with all the lies I had to process. Her jaw tightened, but she tried to play it cool. "Jake, I don't want to fight. Can we just talk like adults?" "Sure," I said. "Let's talk. How long has this been going on? And don't you dare lie to me again." She sighed dramatically, like I was the one being unreasonable. "There's nothing to tell, Jake. I've already explained everything. Matt and I are just friends, coworkers. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Right?" I said, nodding slowly. "And you usually take your friends to hotels after wine and dinner? Is that part of the company handbook? Or just your own personal policy?" Her face turned red, but she didn't back down. "I told you, I was too tired to drive home. It wasn't what you think." "Lauren," I said, leaning closer. "I have pictures. I have videos. So why don't you stop wasting both our time and tell me the truth?" For a moment I thought she might crack. Her eyes darted around the room, and she opened her mouth like she was about to confess. But then she did something I didn't expect. She doubled down. "You hired someone to spy on me?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea how invasive and controlling that is? Maybe that's why I needed space, Jake. You're suffocating me." I blinked, stunned. "Suffocating you? Are you seriously trying to flip this on me? You don't trust me," she shot back, tears welling in her eyes. "You've been paranoid for weeks, acting like I'm the bad guy when all I've done is work hard and deal with your constant accusations." It was like arguing with a brick wall. She wasn't going to admit anything, no matter how much proof I had. But the tears, the dramatics, that was all the confirmation I needed. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught, that I walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. "We're done talking," I said over my shoulder. "Lawyers are next." After that disastrous conversation, I knew one thing for certain. Lauren wasn't going to own up to anything. If I wanted to get through this, I needed to stop waiting for her to admit the truth and start protecting myself. That afternoon, I made 2 calls. First, to my friend Greg, who had been through a nasty divorce a few years back. Greg gave me the name of his lawyer. Someone ruthless, smart, and immune to manipulation. The second call was to the lawyer herself, Lisa Tran. Lisa didn't waste time sugarcoating things. "Jake, if she's cheating, we need to move fast. Do you have solid evidence?" "I do," I said, sending her the photos and videos the PI had collected. "It's all there. Hotels, dinners, you name it." Lisa paused for a moment before speaking. "This is airtight. But you need to be prepared. This isn't just about splitting up. If she's the kind of person who can lie like this, she might not play fair in court." "I'm ready for whatever she throws at me," I said, even though my stomach was twisting into knots. "Good," Lisa replied. Start gathering financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, anything shared, and keep a record of your conversations with her from now on. No more verbal agreements. Get everything in writing. By the time I hung up, I felt like I had a plan for the first time in days. It didn't fix the heartbreak, but it gave me something to focus on. When I got back home, Lauren was in the living room, scrolling on her phone like nothing had happened. The sheer audacity of her calmness was enough to make my blood boil, but I kept my cool. Lauren, I said, standing in the doorway. She looked up, her expression guarded. I'm staying in the guest room for now. I've already contacted a lawyer. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I thought I saw fear flicker across her face. But she quickly replaced it with a smirk. A lawyer? You're overreacting, Jake. This is ridiculous. Maybe, I said flatly, but if there's nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about, right? She didn't answer. Instead, she rolled her eyes and went back to her phone, muttering something under her breath about how I was being dramatic. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into feeling like I was the problem. This time, I was putting myself first. The next few days were a tense, silent battlefield. Lauren and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was clipped and transactional. Did you pay the electric bill? The groceries are on the counter. We were like strangers passing in the hallway, except the stranger had stomped on my trust and dragged it through the mud that I stayed in the guest room, avoiding her as much as possible. Every time I heard her laugh on the phone or saw her glued to her screen, that gnawing anger crept back. Was she talking to him? Making plans for their next meetup? The not knowing was killing me. But then, the cracks in her mask started to show that it was Friday night, and I was sitting in the guest room, scrolling through job boards because, surprise, surprise, working in the same office as Lauren's coworker lover was not on my list of long-term career goals. Out of nowhere, Lauren knocked on the door and stepped in without waiting for an answer. Classic Lauren move. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, trying to look nonchalant. Jake, can we talk? I didn't even look up. About what? She sighed, walking in further. This. You're really going through with this lawyer thing? Yep, I said curtly, still not meeting her eyes. For a moment, there was silence. Then, in a tone I could only describe as begrudging, she said, Look, I know you're upset and I get it, but don't you think we're both acting a little extreme? I finally glanced up, narrowing my eyes. Extreme? You mean me finding out my wife is cheating on me and deciding I don't want to live like this? That kind of extreme? Her face tightened, and for the first time, I saw a hint of panic. Jake, I told you it wasn't like that. You're blowing this out of proportion. Oh, really? I said, my voice rising. Explain it to me, Lauren. What exactly am I blowing out of proportion? The wine bar? The hotel? The fact that you've been sneaking around with Matt for God knows how long? She opened her mouth, then shut it, clearly scrambling for a comeback. Instead, she pivoted. I just don't think we should throw away 8 years over a mistake. I couldn't help but laugh, though it came out bitter and sharp. A mistake? Lauren, forgetting someone's birthday is a mistake. Leaving the oven on is a mistake. What you did, that's a deliberate choice. Repeated choices. Her composure cracked just a little more. Fine, she snapped. You want to hear it? Yes, I slept with him. Are you happy now? The air went out of the room. Even though I'd known, hearing her admit it still hit like a punch to the gut. Happy? I echoed, my voice shaking. Lauren, I would give anything not to hear you say that. She flinched, and for a brief moment, I thought she might actually apologize. But instead, she doubled down again. It didn't mean anything, Jake. It was just sex. I was stressed and it happened. It's not like I love him. Just sex? You think that makes it better? I think it means it doesn't have to ruin everything, she shouted, her voice cracking that I shook my head, standing up to face her. It already has, Lauren. You ruined it the second you decided I wasn't enough for you. She didn't have an answer to that. Instead, she stormed out, Slamming the door behind her, I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it was all swirling inside me, threatening to boil over. But at least now I knew one thing. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. The next morning I woke up feeling numb, but determined. Lauren's so-called confession the night before had sealed the deal for me. She wasn't sorry. She didn't care about fixing what was broken, and she clearly thought I'd just roll over and accept her excuses. She was wrong. I emailed Lisa Tran and told her I was ready to move forward with filing for divorce. Within hours, Lisa had drafted the paperwork, citing adultery as the primary cause. Seeing the documents in black and white was a gut punch, but also a strange relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control over the situation. When I got home from running errands that afternoon, Lauren was sitting in the living room with her laptop, pretending to work. I couldn't even look at her as I walked by, but she must have sensed something was up because she followed me into the kitchen. "Jake," she said hesitantly, leaning against the counter. "I've been thinking, maybe we should try counseling, to work through this." I stared at her, barely able to contain my disbelief. "Counseling? Lauren, we can't work through the fact that you cheated on me." She crossed her arms, her face hardening. "People work through worse things, Jake. It's not impossible. I just think it's worth a shot before we do something drastic." "Drastic?" I snapped. "You mean like filing for divorce? Because that's already in the works." Her mouth fell open, and for the first time she seemed genuinely caught off guard. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said, my voice cold. "Lisa's sending the paperwork over later this week. You'll be served soon." The color drained from her face, and for a moment, I thought she might actually cry. But then, true to form, she went on the defensive. "You're really going to throw away everything we've built? Over one mistake?" "It wasn't one mistake, Lauren," I said, my voice rising. "It was a series of deliberate choices. Choices that you knew would destroy me, and you made them anyway." She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "And don't you dare try to guilt me into staying. You made this bed, Lauren. Now you can lie in it, alone." I walked away before she could say anything else, heading straight to the guest room to gather more documents Lisa had requested. My hands were shaking as I stuffed papers into a folder, but I felt strangely calm. This was the beginning of the end, and I was ready for it. Later that evening, the cracks in Lauren's facade widened. She stomped around the house, slamming cabinets and muttering under her breath about how unreasonable I was being. At one point, she even accused me of giving up too easily. As if this was some minor marital spat we could patch up with a Hallmark card and a weekend getaway. But I didn't engage. I was done arguing, done trying to make her see the damage she'd caused. My focus was on moving forward, without her. By the time the divorce paperwork was ready to be served, I thought I was prepared for anything. Lauren had shown her true colors, and I was fully committed to moving on. But, of course, she wasn't done yet. The day started like any other in our tense, broken household. Lauren avoiding me avoiding her. I was working in the guest room when I heard her pacing the hallway outside. The sound stopped abruptly, and then she knocked on the door. "Jake," she said, her voice soft, almost shaky. "Can we talk?" I rolled my eyes. Another attempt to guilt me, no doubt. "What now, Lauren?" She pushed the door open and stepped inside, holding a manila envelope. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. For a second, I thought she might be holding the divorce papers. But no, it was something else. "I need you to see this," she said, sliding the envelope onto the desk in front of me. "Before you make any decisions." I didn't trust her, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the envelope and pulled out a series of papers. My eyes scanned the first page, and my stomach dropped. It was a letter from her doctor. A letter stating she was pregnant. "Lauren," I said slowly, my voice heavy with suspicion. "What is this?" She looked down, twisting her hands nervously. "I found out last week. I didn't want to tell you because, well, I knew how things were between us. But now, with everything that's happening, I thought you should know." My head was spinning. Pregnant? Now? After everything she'd done? My thoughts immediately jumped to the worst-case scenario. And I'm supposed to believe this is my child? Her head snapped up, her expression shifting from nervous to indignant. How dare you even ask that? Of course it's yours, Jake. Lauren, I said, holding up the papers. You've been cheating on me for who knows how long. Forgive me if I'm a little skeptical. She glared at me, tears welling in her eyes. I know I've made mistakes, but this isn't one of them. I swear. Jake, this baby is yours. I stared at her, trying to process the bombshell she just dropped. Was she telling the truth? Or was this just another desperate attempt to manipulate me into staying? You're going to take a paternity test? I said firmly, setting the papers down. If you're telling the truth, we'll deal with it. But if you're lying... She cut me off, her voice trembling with anger. I'm not lying. God, Jake, why can't you just believe me for once? I stood up, meeting her furious gaze. Because, Lauren, you've given me no reason to. This changes nothing until I know the truth. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I sank back into my chair, my mind racing. Was this her last-ditch effort to save our marriage? Or had life just thrown me one final curveball? After Lauren's dramatic exit, I sat in the guest room for what felt like hours, staring at the papers she'd left. Pregnant. That one word had thrown my entire plan into chaos. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that this baby was mine and somehow that meant we could salvage something. But the other, louder part of me, the part that had been lied to and betrayed, knew I couldn't trust a single word out of her mouth without proof. The next day, I called Lisa Tran. I laid it all out for her, the pregnancy, the possibility that the baby wasn't mine, and Lauren's insistence otherwise. She's bluffing, Lisa said bluntly. If it's true, we'll handle it, but don't let this derail your plans. The first thing you need to do is insist on a paternity test. Already on it, I said. She'll fight me on this, won't she? She might, Lisa admitted. But legally, she can't refuse. And Jake, if it's not your child, this could actually strengthen your case. Adultery is one thing, but carrying another man's baby? That's a whole different level of betrayal. The idea turned my stomach, but I knew she was right. I confronted Lauren that night in the kitchen, laying out the terms as calmly as I could manage. We're getting a paternity test, I said flatly. You can either cooperate, or we can let the court order it. She glared at me from across the room, her face flushed with anger. You don't trust me at all, do you? Not even a little, I said, my voice sharp. This isn't about trust, Lauren. It's about the truth. So what's it going to be? After a long, tense silence, she finally nodded. Fine. Do the damn test. The next few weeks were torture. Waiting for the test results felt like waiting for the jury to deliver a verdict. Lauren acted like she was above it all, refusing to talk about it and pretending everything was normal. Meanwhile, I was barely holding it together, flipping between anger, fear, and a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, this baby was mine. Finally, the results came in. I opened the envelope alone in the guest room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. 0% probability of paternity. The words blurred on the page as a wave of cold fury washed over me. She had lied. Again. This child wasn't mine, and she'd known it. I stormed into the living room, where Lauren was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. It's not mine, I said, holding up the paper. Her face fell, the color draining from her cheeks. For once, she didn't have a snappy comeback or an excuse ready to go. Jake, Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to explain this away. You knew this wasn't my child, and you tried to use it to manipulate me. You are disgusting. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't care. I was done feeling sorry for her. You've lied to me, cheated on me, and now this? We're done, Lauren. Completely done. She broke down sobbing, but I turned and walked away. There was nothing left to say. After that explosive confrontation, the house became a war zone. Lauren barely looked at me, and when she did, It was with a mixture of anger and desperation. She stopped trying to defend herself or spin the situation. She knew she was out of moves. I gave Lisa the paternity results, and she filed them along with the divorce papers. If there had been any doubt in my mind about going through with this, it evaporated the moment I saw Lauren's face crumble when she was officially served. She tried to act unfazed, but I could see the cracks in her armor. "You're really going to do this?" she asked that night, standing in the doorway of the guest room like a ghost. "Throw away everything we've built?" I didn't even look up from the folder of financial documents I was organizing. "Lauren, you threw it away the moment you chose Matt, the hotels, the lies, and this whole mess. Don't put this on me." She didn't respond, just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the lies, the manipulation, and the way she tried to use a pregnancy that wasn't even mine to trap me. The pity evaporated. Over the next week, Lauren's behavior became more erratic. She alternated between sulking in silence and lashing out at me, accusing me of being cold and unreasonable. At one point, she even had the audacity to say, "You're overreacting, Jake. People cheat all the time and they get past it. Why can't you just be mature about this?" "Mature?" I repeated, my voice dripping with incredulity. "You think it's immature to expect honesty and fidelity from the person I married? You cheated, lied, and then tried to pass off someone else's baby as mine. If you think that's something people just get past, then you're more delusional than I thought." She stormed off, slamming the bedroom door so hard it rattled the walls. I stayed in the guest room that night, scrolling through apartment listings on my laptop. The sooner I got out of this house, the better. Lisa was moving fast with the divorce proceedings, and for that I was grateful. The discovery phase was underway, and I was digging up every financial record, text message, and piece of evidence I could find to make sure I came out of this clean. Meanwhile, Lauren was floundering. She'd hired a lawyer, but her case was weak, and she knew it. The paternity test had been a nail in the coffin. The final blow came when I discovered that Lauren had been using our joint bank account to fund some of her outings with Matt. Dinners, hotels, even gifts. I forwarded the receipts to Lisa, who assured me this would not sit well with the judge. When I confronted Lauren about it, she barely tried to deny it. "I was stressed, Jake. I needed an outlet." "An outlet," I said, laughing bitterly. "You drained our account for your affair, and you think calling it an outlet makes it okay? Unbelievable." "Money isn't everything," she shot back, her voice trembling with rage. "No," I agreed, "but integrity is, and you've got none left." That was the last real conversation we had. From that point on, we communicated solely through our lawyers. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected, but not without a few twists. Lauren, unsurprisingly, tried to play the victim in court. Her lawyer painted me as controlling and overly suspicious, citing the private investigator and the paternity test as evidence of my supposed paranoia. It was laughable, really. Luckily, Lisa was as sharp as ever. She dismantled Lauren's claims with the receipts I had provided, the photos, and the videos from the PI. The paternity results were the nail in the coffin, and Lauren's attempt to justify her actions fell flat. "Your Honor," Lisa said during the final hearing, "my client acted in good faith for this marriage until it became evident that Mrs. Anderson, Lauren's last name, had engaged in a prolonged affair, used marital funds to support that affair, and misrepresented the paternity of her pregnancy. These actions speak for themselves." Lauren's lawyer tried to pivot, arguing that everyone makes mistakes, and that a divorce would financially devastate her. I couldn't believe the audacity, considering she had no problem spending our money on her escapades with Matt. The judge wasn't buying it either. In the end, the ruling was clear. I would keep the majority of our assets, including the house, while Lauren was left with only her personal savings and her car. The judge also ordered her to reimburse me for the marital funds she had misused. Something Lisa said was rare but warranted in this case due to the extent of her betrayal. When the ruling was read, Lauren's face crumpled. For the first time in months, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She had lost everything, her credibility, her financial security, and, most importantly, her ability to manipulate me. She cornered me outside the courtroom after the hearing. Jake, please, she said, her voice trembling. Can't we just talk? We've been through so much together. I know I screwed up, but I love you. I stared at her, barely able to contain my disgust. You don't love me, Lauren. You loved the comfort and convenience I gave you. And now that it's gone, so are you. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Don't contact me again, I said coldly. It's over. Walking out of that courthouse felt like shedding a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I was freed. It's been a few weeks since the court finalized everything, and I can't say the process was painless, but it was necessary. I'm writing this from my new apartment, a clean slate in every sense. The house we shared is gone, sold as part of the settlement. I thought I'd feel more nostalgic about it, but honestly, it just feels like a chapter that needed to end. Lauren hasn't tried to contact me since that last encounter outside the courtroom, and I'm grateful for that. Matt, the guy she risked it all for, apparently dropped her the moment things got complicated. It's ironic, isn't it? She burned down our life for someone who didn't even stick around to pick up the ashes. The past few months have taught me more about myself than the previous 8 years of marriage ever did. I've learned that trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's shattered, no amount of apologies or excuses can rebuild it. I've also learned that boundaries aren't selfish. They're essential. If someone disrespects you repeatedly, it's not your job to fix them or tolerate it. I miss Lauren. Sometimes, I miss the version of her I thought I married, the woman who made me laugh and seemed to want the same future I did. But that person doesn't exist anymore if she ever did. And honestly, the peace I found in being on my own far outweighs any fleeting sadness. For anyone out there going through something similar, here's my advice. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't let someone gaslight you into doubting your instincts. Get proof, but protect yourself. Emotions can cloud judgment, but evidence can give you clarity, and a solid case if things escalate. Set boundaries and stick to them. You deserve respect and honesty, and if your partner can't give you that, it's time to walk away. Lean on people you trust. Whether it's friends, family, or a great lawyer, having a support system makes all the difference. Life after betrayal isn't easy, but it's possible. You'll feel broken, angry, and lost at times, but each day gets a little better. You'll laugh again, trust again, and maybe even love again. And when you do, it'll be with someone who truly deserves you. For now, I'm focusing on myself, my career, my health, and the friendships that got me through this mess. The future feels uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it also feels full of possibilities. Thanks to everyone who's been following this journey. Writing it out has been cathartic, and your support means more than you know. Here's to moving forward.